What is the direction of Guild Wars 2's current story? Visions of Eternity's story has been insane so far, and I have been loving the story a lot. One of the biggest aspects for why I do is just how big the mysteries are right now, and most importantly, how intriguing those mysteries are. So today I want to dive into the current Guild Wars 2 story and speculate about the future, so let's get started. First, let's just highlight some of the biggest mysteries we currently have actively playing a part in the story, the biggest being what Vlox's goals are, with some smaller mysteries in the form of what Iskarin's goals are, and what is happening on Castora. Vlox is one of the best characters that has been recently introduced in Guild Wars 2. The last time I was enthralled by a character like this was at the start of the Secrets of the Obscure expansion, where I really like a bunch of the new Wizard's Court and Astral Ward characters. Of course, those are allies, and Vlox is the first villain that I have genuinely loved a lot in Guild Wars 2 in quite a while. Vlox is also the leader of the Inquest, which is one of the most widespread and persistent enemy forces that we have ever seen throughout all enemy forces in either Guild Wars games. I do enjoy the Inquest quite a bit, and it does tend to make sense when they make their way back into the story. I will say, once this expansion is over, I do hope they are seriously set back. The idea of the Inquest is likely something that will never go away for as long as the Asura continue to exist, but I'm hoping that maybe given the fact that Vlox has now abandoned the Inquest, and how we may be able to defeat Kuda, we can make sure the Inquest aren't a huge threat for a long time. I will also say that it is interesting that Vlox used the Inquest as a means to an end. The Inquest is such a powerful faction, but this really shows how weak and unstable it can be, and how it is mostly just propped up by the fact that they are so expansive with various power-hungry individuals using the entire organization as a way to prop themselves up. But what did Vlox use the Inquest for? Well, it was to recover Ancora so that he could undergo Divitium Nova, aka Ascension, and essentially become the equivalent of a wizard, which would allow Vlox to tap into the flow of magic of Tyria, being able to utilize that magic for his own goals. And well, what are his goals? And that is what we don't exactly know just yet. We know that Vlox believes he is saving the world and that he has Tyria's best interests at heart, that he thinks that if he can make a single change to the code of creation, that the world will be saved. We also know that Vlox has seen something that is driving him to do all of this, and really from what I have seen thus far, that is all we know. And honestly, I am enthralled by the entire story and cannot wait for the next update because I really want to learn more about what Vlox is doing, maybe even more than how I want to defeat Vlox and protect Tyria from whatever extreme thing he is planning on doing. I just seriously want to know what that extreme thing is and what threat he thinks exists. One big idea is that this is related to some sort of demonic threat, or extra Tyria threat if you will. That has been a big theme of Guild Wars 2 recently between the Cryptus and the Titans in the previous two expansions, so maybe Vlox believes that there is something he's able to do that will protect Tyria from demons. We know that demons are interested in Tyria because of the abundance of magic, and we know that Vlox now has access to the flows of magic of Tyria, so maybe Vlox is planning on doing something that will eventually lead to him destroying or getting rid of magic on Tyria or something along those lines. The benefits of that would be good in the sense that maybe demons wouldn't care about Tyria anymore, but the consequences could be catastrophic. On the most extreme end of things, magic is often described as Tyria's lifeblood, and perhaps without magic, Tyria will just cease to function and will die out. It may be less extreme and more intriguing ideas that maybe the magic levels of Tyria will be drastically reduced, making Tyria less interesting to demons, but with there still being some magic available. This could be a major narrative moment and vibe shift for the franchise if ArenaNet wants to make the Guild Wars franchise more grounded in pure fantasy instead of the combination of fantasy and high magic tech we see in modern Guild Wars 2. Another idea related to this is that Vlox is just going to massively reshape Tyria and basically reset the world to some extent. And really this could lead into something massive in the Guild Wars franchise that I think some people would like, but many people wouldn't like, and I'm more on the end of not liking this. Where this could serve as a reset for Guild Wars, where a potential Guild Wars 3 or whatever that so many people float around could begin after Vlox changes everything. The entire makeup of the world could be different, which races exist could be different, and so on and so forth. I think a less extreme version of that, which I think I would like more if we were to go down that path, would be maybe a soft reset. Maybe Vlox messing with Tyria changes the world a bit, magic is less, and we see the balance of power in the world shift. Combined with a big time skip into a new game or new expansion, we could see Tyria be a very interesting place where it still looks and feels like the Tyria we know, but it's just changed a fair bit to be fresh. Another idea that is related to this again is the idea of going super crazy with magic and destroying everything, but it's connected to the mists, meaning that everything goes bonkers crazy, but it doesn't have a big impact on Tyria because we are dealing with the threat in the mists and trying to prevent that bonkers craziness from impacting Tyria, if you will. Think back to the idea of Living Road Season 4, where we experience Krakatork basically consuming reality, but it doesn't have a massive impact on Tyria because he is consuming other areas in the vast universe. We could see Vlox doing that to some extent in the next expansion. We have been to the mists and other realms quite a bit throughout Guild Wars 2, including in both of the previous 2 expansions, but I think many people would enjoy a dedicated Mist exclusive expansion. Honestly, it is lower on my list for preferences of an expansion, as I want to explore so many other things in Tyria, but I do still think it would be cool and definitely deserves to be the major focus of an expansion at some point, so maybe it's next. One absolutely crazy idea that I have seen people floating around is that Vlox's plans is going to lead into a double expansion. No, not a double expansion like 2 expansions at the same time that you buy for Guild Wars 2, or 2 back-to-back expansions that are deeply tied together. A double expansion in the sense that both Guild Wars 2 and the original Guild Wars is going to get an expansion at the same time that are tied together. First off, it would be incredible to see Guild Wars get another campaign or expansion, but I don't really think that is likely, and if we did, I don't know how I feel about it being an expansion that is directly connected to current Guild Wars 2 story. I feel like maybe it would ruin the lore and vibes of the first game, but maybe I'm just a pessimist in that regard. But I will say the idea is incredibly intriguing, especially if you were to get super into the concept of these 2 expansions narratively taking place at the same time if Heroes from the original Guild Wars goes into the mists outside of time itself, while Heroes from Guild Wars 2 goes into the mists outside of time itself. Maybe one of the most technically impressive things that any game company would ever do is being able to sync Guild Wars players and Guild Wars 2 players together to exist in the same area at the same time. It would be interesting to see Guild Wars 2 players flying around on their sky scales and laughing at Guild Wars players who can't even jump. This entire idea could definitely fit into the ideas that we know about with the Joteka, which was the setting for Guild Wars Utopia before Utopia was cancelled in favor of Guild Wars 2. But ultimately, I think this entire idea is unlikely, even if it is fun to think about, but Joteka as a setting itself could definitely be an interesting area for us to explore in the next expansion if we do go down the route of Vlox destabilizing the mists or whatever. Another massive and crazy idea is that Vlox could just ultimately destroy existence altogether. Maybe ArenaNet is done with the Guild Wars franchise and wants to move on, or maybe wants to shut down operations. Maybe Vlox could just be a way to close the game out in an admittedly massive way that would probably make a lot of headlines. People always talk about an interesting idea for the Marvel Cinematic Universe with an alternative ending to Endgame where Thanos wins and that is just the end of the MCU. It doesn't make sense financially and it wouldn't be the most rewarding story-wise, but it would be a pretty big moment and it would be very unique. The same is true here. It makes no sense financially and is ultimately something that a lot of people, myself included, would hate, but it would definitely be a big moment. I think the most likely scenario is that Vlox is trying to do something crazy with the magics of Tyria, and the boring answer is we just stop him. Tyria is saved and we move on to another threat. Now, while that is boring, there could definitely be a very interesting story tied into this that can be setting up future stories with what Vlox is scared about. Is it demons? Is he scared of Iskarin? Is he scared of the human gods? Did he see a vision where Taimi becomes God Empress of Tyria? Hopefully we will find out in the next update. Now, speaking of Iskarin, this brings us to the smaller things I've been thinking about with what Iskarin's goals actually are. Iskarin is an incredibly interesting character that we have fortunately learned a lot more about within the Visions of Eternity as we have returned to his homeland, aka the Seer's homeland. Some people think Iskarin is secretly a big villain, and I definitely find him suspicious, but I think he is a character who is maybe more like to Vlox than people think. Vlox is a character who is maybe, deep down, a good person, but is so blinded by knowledge that his actions make him a villain despite his intentions. Iskarin, deep down, is probably a benevolent being, but given the fact that he has been alive for such a long time, and given how much knowledge he has, and maybe the weight he feels for his responsibility to protect Tyria, he is maybe going to act more like a villain in the future. We know he hides things from us, that's all he's ever really done, and it will be interesting to see how he handles that and how we handle him in the future. related to what is going on with Isgara, and I'm just really interested in what is going on in Kastora as well. This is a massive territory that we don't know all that much about beyond what we have been able to explore thus far. We are only going to explore a little bit of this area for a short time with what we can do in Visions of Eternity, but ultimately there is probably enough land here to be equivalent to the full initial release of Guild Wars 2. Now there could be an infinite amount of things that we can discover in Kastora, and that is a large reason for why we are here. Ideas like Ancora and the Spires of Exaltation are being utilized to push the narrative of Visions of Eternity and Guild Wars 2 forward, and they were put in Kastora because story-wise, that's a really easy idea to develop and create. But the ancient races of Tyria have always been an interesting idea to think about because in many ways, they were comparable to the civilizations that we see in Tyria, and in many other ways were actually more advanced. So it's just a very interesting dynamic to explore through Kastora and see ancient ruins of a magically advanced civilization, and to that end, I think it's interesting to think about how we may explore more of the ancient races in the future. We've explored a ton of the dwarves in both Guild Wars and Guild Wars 2 while we returned to the Mersant homeland in Janthir Wilds, and now where the Seers hung out in Visions of Eternity. That leaves the Jotun, who we could explore more of in the future, alongside the Forgotten, who we really don't know all that much about other than their endeavors with the Glint. If we keep up with this trend of exploring ancient races, I would be willing to bet that the next expansion may have a major focus on the Jotun or the Forgotten, both of which could potentially tie in well to the magic storyline that we see within Kastora, but also linking back to whatever we may potentially see with Vlox. Ultimately, everything is just super interesting to think about, and I'm just super excited to see what happens next in the Guild Wars 2 story, because I personally think it's pretty good right now. And that's the video. I hope you enjoyed. I've always enjoyed Guild Wars 2 story, even when many people aren't the biggest fans of it, but the current Visions of Eternity story is just something that is extra exciting right now, and I just wanted to dive deeper into it. I hope you all enjoyed watching, and I hope you all are taking great care of yourselves. Have a good one, everyone.